As an 18-year-old, he stood before a judge and was being sentenced to jail. He's now considered one of America's all-time great trial lawyers and one of the great trial lawyers of our time. He uses mind maps and not notes or outlines to question witnesses. He teaches. He'll be teaching at the Trial Lawyers University. He'll be teaching at the Spence Method at Thunderhead Ranch. And not only will he be teaching at the Spence Method, but he is actually Jerry Spence's lawyer. In 2009, he took part in a defamation trial that resulted in a 9-figure verdict. And his cross-examination of the main participant, a billionaire businessman, is the stuff of legends. I'm Neil Rockheim. This is the Killer Cross-Examination podcast, and my guest is none other than Rex Parris. Rex, welcome to the show. So Rex, tell me a little bit about how you began as a lawyer. So let's start from the very beginning if we can. I don't want to start when atoms collided, but take us to the point where how you got to be in the position to be the lawyer that you are today.
You know why you can't trust atoms?
No, why?
They make up everything.
Okay. That's a good one. I'm gonna remember that.
I read it in jokes that grandfathers should bore their grandchildren with.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
I guess I started becoming a lawyer when I was a busboy, working with my mother in a local restaurant. I dropped out of high school, but she was always pointing out who the players were in town, who the people were with power. And then I found myself in the regrettable situation of, I think I had about 8 traffic tickets I didn't think I really needed to appear on.
Okay.
And I'm standing in front of a judge who sends me to jail. And
how old were you?
18. And I never felt such mind-numbing terror in my life, where you literally can't control your knees from shaking. And, it was a small town back then. It's not so small now, but my mother knew the judge and she went to his house and talked him out of it later. But, I went through so I didn't actually have to go through that experience. I did volunteer community service for 6 months instead. But at that moment, I decided that, I wanted to be on this side of that bar, not that side. It really, I think power means, in many respects to me, protection, safety. And so that was probably the moment that things turned around. And so I went to community college, and it was a long road, but eventually I got a law degree. But had that not happened, I don't think I would have.
Interesting. Did you always want to be what we call a civil lawyer? And when we say civil, we don't mean there are really 2 types of, I guess, just overarching fields of trial lawyers, right? There's criminal lawyers like what I do, and then there are civil lawyers that end up suing on behalf or bringing cases on behalf of individuals or groups against corporations, entities, other people. Did you always want to be on that side of the legal field?
No, I actually wanted to be a criminal lawyer until I actually did it. And, I did it for a while and I found it just too painful. I don't know how to represent somebody without forming a very close attachment with them. I care about them. I worry about them. And I just couldn't bear after a while people that I loved going off into a dungeon. And they make no mistake, those are dungeons. They're clean for the most part, but they're dungeons. And
I wouldn't give it You're not going to get any 5-star diamond awards, for being clean in the local lockup. Or,
Yeah.
I mean, think about it, in what some consider to be the crown jewel of, the United States, which is New York City. If you're incarcerated in a federal case or waiting for trial, you're in the was it the Manhattan Correctional Center, right? The MCC, which a judge recently in sentencing described as, I think he said it was barbaric or third world. So
I think that's accurate for a lot of jails, most jails. Uh,
it was too painful. That's interesting. I didn't know that about you.
And so, when my first job was as an insurance defense lawyer, and I knew I wasn't going to stay there long. And so the first question I'd always ask every plaintiff was, how'd you find your lawyer?
Okay. I'll bite. That seems like a joke that you might tell one of your grandkids too. So how did you find your lawyer? So, but you asked, and how did they answer you?
Well, it would depend on the person, but, ultimately what I was doing was market research. One was name ID was very important, and referrals, having a lot of community contacts. But, mostly in most families, the wife will pick the lawyer on a personal injury case. If it's a business issue, that may not be the case, but certainly with personal injury, that is. And so, very early, 30 years ago, we were defining how to target the market.
So you started off in the insurance defense. You started off as a criminal defense lawyer, then you ventured into insurance defense.
Yeah, it was a firm that did both. Actually, they were primarily insurance defense, but they let me do criminal defense, because my goal ultimately was to be a trial lawyer, and they were cooperating with that.
Did you know what that meant then? When you were saying to yourself that you wanted to be a trial lawyer, like as you look back at that younger version of Rex Parris, did you know then what being a trial lawyer meant?
And I think it took me about a year to realize that, this was an insurance defense firm, and maybe 3 of them had ever had a trial. What it seemed to be is the biggest challenge most of them faced were staying out of the courtroom.
Sure. It's funny because
it then took me 30 years to realize, or 20 years to find out why that's the case.
Tell me, what'd you figure out?
Well, a courtroom is an incredibly threatening environment. And it's threatening for a lot of genetic reasons. It's in our DNA. And I can give you the background of that is what the research tells us is that, as we evolved in the tribes, we were totally dependent on the tribe for survival. If you got banished, you died. You either froze to death, the animals ate you, the tribe a mile away killed you. You could not survive without the tribe. And most tribes were composed of about 12 families, 12 nuclear, if you were to call them that, although there were no nuclear families, everybody kind of lived together. And it was controlled by the chief. All the resources were controlled by the chief. So what would happen if you did something that caused enough dissension within the tribe, you got banished. And that usually required you to be in a weaker position, which comes from public humiliation. The person who humiliates themselves enough, nobody listens to. He has no influence. That's the person that gets banished. So what do we have in a courtroom situation? You got 12 people over here. You got the chief up there on the bench, and one of you are going to be banished. Make no mistake about it. That's the nature of the contest. And so that's why even to this day I'll go into trials, and the opposing counsel will be the senior partner of a white shoe firm, with 500 lawyers or 1,000 lawyers, and when he starts, he's shaking. It's subtle, but it's there. His voice is little different than it normally is, but he's terrified. I see that over and over again. And I've seen him, stand like this as they talk to the jury in opening and closing, which is a very protective, and they have no idea why. And what I observed very early is that most of the guys with reputations in the firms were, they suffered from severe imposter syndrome.
Okay.
And now I know why, and I know how to fix it. And, you first have to let people know why they're so afraid, and that it's, you'd have to be mentally challenged not to be terrified, given how we evolved in tribes, and in that setting. And then you have to learn how to deal with it. And how to deal with it has nothing to do with your character. It has nothing to do with your courage. It's just technique. It's anybody can learn it. I think the thing I'm proudest about, it's not my verdicts, but the verdicts of my associates and my kids.
Interesting.
Is because
let me follow up on that for a second. I'm very curious about why should, as we're listening, you clearly know a lot about how the mind and body and how we react to different situations. How did a kid who found himself standing in front of a judge being, essentially ushered off to jail at 18, how did you end up in the position where you, as a lawyer, where you learned this? What's your, I don't say it's a secret, but how did you learn it?
Well, you study. I get up at 4 o'clock even to this day, and what I study is cognitive science. The reason I did that, though, is it goes back to when I was in utero. When I was in utero, apparently I had a stroke, and I developed an arachnoid cyst, which caused pressure on my left amygdala. So I grew up on the extremes of emotions. If I was sad, I was in utter agony. If I was enraged, if I was angry, I was enraged. And so it makes it very difficult to navigate the world when you are constantly bouncing back and forth to extremes. But I never learned that. I never knew that until about 5 years ago when they removed it. And it was like, damn, this is what normies feel.
So you were,
but let me finish with it, and then we'll talk about that if you want.
Yeah, please.
So in order for me to survive, and especially as a trial lawyer, to survive, I mean, you know what happens in courtrooms and what judges will do to you, and survival required me to find out how to develop the techniques to be able to deal with this. I didn't know what I was dealing with. I just knew I was different, and in order to learn those techniques, I was really compelled to study them. And as soon as
where have your studies taken you? I know you've had I know people read about like cross-examination and they read about openings and voir dire, but from what I understand, your studies have been really different. They've been more, I'll say, elemental than the end product of how to do voir dire or how to communicate. They really have been more at the element level.
That's true. One of the things, I'm almost 70 years old now, and what I learned over those years was if you want to solve a problem, you really have to break it down into as granular a spectrum as you can, and then build back up. And that's what I attempted to do. But it's this gesture. It took me 6 months to learn that, so you can't see it. And for me to be able to just use it at the appropriate time.
Tell me what you mean. So you just did a gesture. What do you mean it took you 6 months to use it but not see it?
I'll be talking to you and I'll do this, right? That's signaling to you we're affiliated. We're on the same team. We're in agreement with this, right? It's very elementary, in the way our brain, um, decodes it, and but it's incredibly powerful. In fact, it made me $100 million one day.
That made you, okay. I have to ask, how did that make or contribute to you making $100 million in a day?
Well, not in a day, but
In a case.
I was in this case. It was a huge class action, and but I also represented the court reporter's husband, and I didn't think anything of it, and because Lancaster is in LA County, but we're off onto our cell, where there's this mountain range that separates us. And it's a pretty closed community in that regard, so it's not unusual for that to happen for me. But the judge was concerned about it and came out and offered to recuse himself over it. This was a judge that was ruling almost every day in our way, in our direction, and he offered him that. But right before I was talking to opposing counsel, and I was doing my routines with him, and he goes, that's okay, Judge.
Interesting.
I think if we'd gotten a different judge, it might have been a different result.
And you ended up getting a verdict or a settlement of $100 million.
There was two cases actually, and the combined was over 300 million. And they settled it during the Voir. But that's an example of it. This is powerful stuff.
So we do things like this every day, probably without necessarily thinking of the impact that it has on the listener, right?
That's accurate.
Are there other things that you have, and I'm sure there are, we probably can't begin to scratch the surface, but.
Yeah, but understand, it's not impact on the listener. We have visual cues to each other so we can identify foes and friends, and those visual cues will always override the verbal, what we say.
Can you give me an example of a visual cue?
Okay, let's do it. I think this is probably the most profound one. You want to get rid of racism? Put everybody in the same uniform.
Okay.
Look what happens in sports teams. Within the team, racism is really just a minor issue. What all of that, most of all of that stems from is we grew up in a very hostile environment on the Serengeti. That's where we evolved. And every day was a struggle just to survive. I actually spent I spent 10 days on the Serengeti, and it's like a banquet for the predators. That's how I described it.
Okay.
When you recognize that, then you start realizing why visuals are important. You need to know immediately who's with you and who's not. And so as we evolve, we have all these different techniques for doing so.
Interesting.
And I'm never going to master them. The more I learn about them, the more I understand them, the more I can see things develop, and the more I can effectuate a course correction as they develop. Now,
I know you work with you have associates in your firm, and I believe you work with your sons. Is that right?
2 sons, yeah.
And a moment ago, you were telling us how among the results or the verdicts that you've been able to accomplish, the ones that you're the most proud of, or among the ones you're the most proud of, are the ones that your associates and your sons have been able to attain. Tell me about that.
Well, everyone that we've trained in the firm, they're hitting 7-figure verdicts within the first 1, 2, or 3 cases. You there's some cases you just can't get a 7-figure verdict on, but not very many.
No, but you've got 9. You probably have gotten 9-figure verdicts on those cases. So
no, not that much. But it's not a trick. It's just recognizing what's valuable, what's important to people. And it's also the biggest obstacle to trial lawyers is themselves. I mean, we go in there and we pretend to be something we're clearly not. We spend all of our cognitive energy into the facade we're attempting to display to the world, and about this much on the case.
Now,
and so once you're able to know exactly when you're afraid and why you're afraid, and how to turn that into a valuable thing, you're so far ahead of everybody else at just that point. Then when you start understanding, just essentially, now they weren't elementary 5 years ago, but now are becoming elementary principles. It's hard not to be good.
What some of the things that you're talking about, Rex, sound very similar to things that to sentiments that I have heard Jerry Spence share with other lawyers. What's your relationship to Jerry Spence, or at least what can you tell us some history about you and him that you're comfortable sharing? Because I obviously know that you and he were close.
I represent him. I met Jerry in 1995 when I went to the Thunderhead Ranch that was the second year of the Jerry Spence Trial Lawyers College. Now, and so it's been a 25-year relationship now.
He's going to go down in history as one of the all-time great lawyers on behalf of.
No question. He's right up there with Clarence Darrow for the 20th century. He had remarkable insights, and he wanted to share them, and he wanted to teach lawyers, and he put I think he put $8 million into changing the ranch, and it was a cattle ranch into a place to teach lawyers, and gave it to them. He's got a heart as big as his ass, and it's a big ass.
Well, teaching was obviously very important to him, and
right.
it seems very important to you. Why is teaching so important to you?
Well, I just remember how desperate I was when I got there, and how much of a fraud I thought I was. You're trying to act like something you're not, so of course you feel like a fraud. But I left that place that summer with a clear understanding that these are skills I can learn. And he brought a lot of people together to teach us. There was Paul Rivera from Seattle, or the Washington area. Racehorse Haynes, who's now deceased, but he was one of America's greatest criminal lawyers. He was there, and the list goes on and on and on. And it was an experiment in trying to discover what are the actual skills that are being utilized. And it took a long time. And I think, as most organizations do, it veered off in the wrong direction. But I think, because of the litigation and all, it's now coming back. And, we're putting on a summer program in August that I have no doubt that anybody who attends that will come out a far better trial lawyer, far better. I mean, exponentially better. because it is a set of discrete skill sets that you have to learn and practice, and how well you practice them will determine how well you use them in the courtroom.
So what case, I know you've had they're monster cases. I mean, some of the results that you've been able to attain on behalf of your clients are extraordinary results.
I'm always disappointed, but
Okay. Tell me about some of the results. And then I do want to ask why you're disappointed. I mean, I know I don't get the sense that you're kidding, but it seems like you probably mean that you get a result and it's maybe the biggest verdict in the history of a particular area, and yet you still are disappointed with the verdict in some ways. So tie those two together.
I think what we do is so abstract. I mean, how do you value a personal injury case? There is no measuring device. And so I come up with a view of the case that I firmly believe, right? And rarely does the jury give me that amount.
Okay.
And it's always less.
So let's use I know in 2009 you had, what was the highest jury verdict? Was it in the United States, or it was the largest verdict in a defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress case? Is that right?
I think it was the largest verdict in the country at that time.
Tell me about the case.
Well, there were 4 employees. We represented 2 of them, but the lawyers for the other, plaintiffs, or actually they were defendants, had never tried a case before. and I had spent very little time on the case before the trial, and so, like, we're having this breakfast before the first morning with the judge, and I'm asking for their jury instructions, and they said, "What?"
Oh no.
So we're getting ready to go into a trial, and there's no motions in limine. I mean, we have them, but they don't. No motions in limine, no jury instructions, and really no understanding of what they were doing. So I just said, "Look, you guys just shut the up in that courtroom, and I'll get you a lot of money." And for the most part, that's what they did. I mean, they had very little involvement.
So who did you represent?
I represented this guy's business manager and and one of the other lower level clerks in the office. And he had significant issues, and he accused them of stealing. Started out at 100 million and ended up 400 million. He was accusing them of stealing. And whenever he had real paranoid reactions to things, and he started adding people to the list, but the one closest to him was the business manager who I represented, and he just didn't seem to be able to. She finally had enough and said, "I'm done," and that's when he started filing lawsuits. And he had about 20 some firms he went through in the LA area, suing these people, and they were essentially defenseless. And somebody came to us and said, "I'm going to defend these 2 women, and ask for our help." And I looked at it, and so we file a cross complaint, and then the others piled on. And what they would do is whatever we filed, they would copy and file. I mean, they were literally right out of law school.
How long was the trial?
It lasted 10 days, 6 days. I mean, I forget. It wasn't really a long trial. But it had a lot of, it was a fun trial. Well, what eventually happened is what we did is we struck his answer, because he refused to come to Lancaster for his deposition. Yeah. He just wasn't the air, it wasn't arrogance. It was, I don't know what you call it, but he looked at the world that he had to be on the top of it, that people had to be subservient to him because he, had made so much money. And he was very flamboyant, and extremely charming when he wanted to be. Uh, and but that's ultimately what happened is we got his answers stricken. It was a ordeal to do it. And then he attacked the judge, like he had pickets outside the courtroom every day. He hired Actors Guild, Now, he was clearly doing this to impact the jury, but, Actors Guild go to lunch at noon, just like the jury did.
So did you end up examining? Did you call him as an adverse witness? Well, he was the plaintiff in the case, right? So you would have had to.
He wasn't. I didn't expect him to come, but he had the courtroom filled with people. Lawyers. I mean, expensive lawyers. I mean, from multiple firms, and they were texting him throughout the.
We can say who this person is, right?
Well, I'm reluctant to because, you thought, yeah, he's a public figure and all that, but do I really need to?
Well, they can look up the case, right? Yeah. They can look up the case. So let me ask you this. Did you end up?
Let me tell you how he showed up though, because they're quite a story.
Yeah, I'm dying to hear it.
So, I got somebody on the stand and all of a sudden the door's open, right? And in he walks. I mean, it's quite an entry. And he sits down because he just couldn't bear not being the center of the show and all this, And so I immediately approached and asked the judge if I, can I call him out of order? And she said, because she was, he was really going after her. She said, not until I get security in here. And I said, because I'm the mayor, I had a sheriff's deputy in the courtroom when he was plain clothes, but I said, we got security. And she said, no, that's not enough. Later, I found out that they had major crimes as the bailiffs. Major crimes in LA County.
Wow.
They're a different breed. You just don't want to mess with them.
Wow.
But so we waited and finally I put him on. And I got to tell you, he was kicking my ass. He was that charming. He was that glib. And I'm thinking, oh no. Oh, how am I going to live this down?
I mean, that's like a clash of titans because you're considered one of the great trial lawyers in the United States, in my opinion.
Thank you.
And here you're cross-examining or examining as an adverse witness this megalomaniac who has the ability to sit in front of a jury for the few moments he's there and to charm them.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your honesty in telling us that you felt like you were. This is an important moment, though, for people that are listening, because every great trial lawyer has been there. Anybody who sits there and tells you that they've dominated every witness is completely full of shit. We've all had moments where we're sitting there and thinking, I'm losing this battle. Right?
Yeah. And, I never approach a witness not thinking I could lose them. I mean, the reason I was so driven to learn this stuff is because of the witnesses that had humiliated me in the past.
Sure.
I mean,
so what happened as you're in the middle of examining?
But then I'm always looking for the little crack,
right?
The little, and I forget what he said, but he said something, and I said, "You are on a mission to destroy their lives, aren't you?" And for some reason, he goes, "I am on a crusade."
What happened when he did that?
Well, it was over then.
Now, what did you do? I want you to let's do more than just tell me about that what he did. What did the jury do? What did you think as that happened? And what was your reaction at that moment?
Well, my reaction at that moment was, how much further do I go? How much better could it be? you know, because now he's revealed himself. And he truly was on a crusade. But you know, I always tend to, if I have one failing, it's not knowing when to quit, you know. And I probably could have quit then, but you know, I didn't. You know, I went into more of the specifics of how his crusade was going on, but I think what got him there was something very insignificant. When I said, you know, when you, because somebody whispered in my ear, you know, what was going on outside. I said, when you got here today, you drove up into the front of the courthouse, right? He said, yes. And I go, you had a driver, yes. And you parked right in front of the door. You know, it's the LA Superior Court, and it's a big building. He goes, yes. And I go, and the curb is red, isn't it? Yes. And your car is still there waiting for you. Isn't that true? Yes. And it's because you don't think the laws really do apply to you, do you? Even the parking laws don't apply to you. You know?
A great question.
And the way the jury was reacting to that is, I think, what caused his anxiety level to get to the point that when that other question came, he exploded.
It's not an answerable question. I mean, you put such a great question to him on a thing that the jury, regular people who are deciding this case, could truly relate to, which is, you know, they walk outside and their car's towed, or they got a boot on it, or they get in a parking ticket, right? And this guy pulls up like, you know, he doesn't care.
Right, he doesn't care. You know, it's a small thing. It probably meant nothing. You know, it's how rich people act. You know, it's why rich people drive in the diamond lane. You know,
is that your proudest? I know I often try to when I talk to juries and clients to prepare them for the fact that there aren't many Perry Mason gotcha moments. There's no Matlock where we get to ask a 30 2-minute 3-minute question and the guy in the back of the courtroom says, okay, I did it.
I can't
have
remember.
You had some of those moments? Because that's like one of those moments. That's like the moment you just described with that witness. That is like one of those Few Good Men type moments where the witness just you
don't get too many dramatic moments like that. But you know, I anymore, it's not that unusual. You know, I mean,
do you use focus groups to help you get there?
Pivotal question and answer that changed the case. That's not that unusual.
So do you use focus groups? How do you prepare yourself, Rex, to get to that point where you can read the witness and thrust and parry with them? It sounds to me, the way you're describing it, almost like a rope-a-dope, like you were really wearing the guy out. Now, that may not have been what your intention was in the beginning, but you were really sort of wearing him out, and then he revealed himself, which, you know, revealed all of the previous hours that you'd probably questioned him to be BS.
Ask that again.
How do you get there? See, when you're, the way you describe it as you're examining him, you're questioning him, and he's sort of, you thought that he was kicking your ass, or he felt that way, or he was.
He was, make no mistake.
But you knew it was bullshit. I mean, yes, he was in the theater of the moment in the courtroom, but in terms of who was being more genuine, you knew he was just putting on a front. He was just doing his charming act and hoped that he'd get away with it for those few hours, right?
Yeah, although I also think that that's who he was. You know, there was no longer any depth to him. You know, and that came out in other witnesses that he, it was all flamboyant show. This is a man with no friends, none, no deep relationships. lot of hookers were going in and out of the place, and but that's what you would expect with somebody who can't form bonds with people. Uh, the I think the thing that I do differently is I walk towards the fear. Whenever I start feeling afraid about something happening, of what the witness is saying, or what he just said, or where he's going, I will walk towards it, because I know it's under the rocks of fear that the gold is, you know. And if I don't have those moments, I'm unable to really knock it out of the park. So I kind of I'm looking for them. I'm trying to
Are you
create.
looking for them ahead of time, or are you looking for them in the middle of the court during the examination and during the trial?
The level of preparation we go into is extreme. I mean, I've gone through the deposition 4 or 5 times. I've role played it with people in the office or my wife. In the early years, my wife used to say, "When I die, I want you to put on my headstone, she was the doctor." Because I was always coming into the kitchen or the living room and saying, "You be the doctor." And then I would start the leading questions and the cross-examination. And, my wife is quite honestly and sincerely the brightest person I've ever met.
It's quite a compliment.
She's incredibly bright. And she would mess with me and frustrate me. And, I mean, she would stay within the rules of the game, but it was never easy. And so by the time I got into the courtroom with these guys, it was so much easier.
Do you do that with? So that's that's really not what you would call a focus group. That's more like a mock trial. I mean, I know it's sort of.
It's very off the cuff, and but it's constant. It's constant. And it's usually, if there's like, I'll reach a point, there's something I know I'm going to want to do, and I'll do that. And I'll do that over and over and over again with different people until it's there. And it's got to be done. You got to get it down to the point that a 10-year-old can understand it. That a 10-year-old can follow it. You got to keep it very simple. You got to simplify it. And I do focus groups, but I've learned not to listen to focus groups. What I'm looking for with focus groups is when it forces me to get ready. Before the trial, and I'm looking for other things I didn't see, issues I didn't see, or sticking points that, I've seen cases fall apart over the seating diagram because you didn't do a seating diagram.
Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, one time there was a case I had where it occurred in a restaurant. It was an assault, and we go through the whole trial, but they thought the 2 witnesses, the eyewitnesses, had to be lying because that's not how people sit in a restaurant. But it was those Denny's tables that go like this, the big ones so you could see that if they were trying to reconstruct it from the words, they would think that they were lying over a very insignificant point. If we just diagrammed it. And that was very early in my career that happened, and I learned then, if you don't have a visual to aid in the testimony, don't even talk about it. It not only will it not be remembered, if it is remembered, it will be what hurts you. It'll be because of the incongruence that people perceive. So we're very big on the visuals, and that's another thing I use focus groups for, is to see how the visuals are going.
Now, I know you're going to be, I want to ask you a couple other questions, and then I want to specifically get to, I'm dying to hear a couple of moments in the courtroom. But I know, because you're so into teaching, I know that you're going to be teaching, I think 6 hours of a presentation at the Trial Lawyers University I think it's in October. In Las Vegas.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, actually.
What are you going to be teaching?
Well, they always want that. They always want a title, and I teach what I feel like teaching at the moment. I mean, I'm constantly like, okay, so I just did one down in LA, and it was supposed to be on for 2 hours. But I'm changing the PowerPoint up to the minute I go on, you know. It's a lot has to do with how I'm feeling, what's in the room, you know, what I perceive that they've already learned that day. But what I teach is I teach persuasion skills. You know, that's what I teach. I teach what is it we have to know in a very granular level to make us better at what we do. And that includes everything. You know, it includes, like, one of the biggest things lawyers have to learn is quit measuring yourself against other lawyers. Quit being jealous of other lawyers. You know, every time I get into that jealous mode where I get that, well, you know, that he must have knew the judge, you know, that moment that we've all had, I know that I've stopped learning. I've stopped improving. There's something about that what occurs when you do that. And it's probably just cognitive energy is being misdirected, you know. But now when I have a colleague or somebody I know get a good verdict, and people I don't even know because I'm the mayor, we send out these proclamations, you know, congratulating them. I'll send them a plant, an email, you know, I celebrate their success, but not for them, for me. You know, I don't want that feeling because it's so disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
The I forget what question I was asking.
No, there's no question. You were talking about what you were going to teach during
Oh, that's right. That's right.
your 6 hours, and you said you'll teach whatever you feel
The
like
first thing
teaching at the moment.
I tend to do is I ask people, how many here would like to be more confident? Now, notice what I did is I gave you permission to participate with the visual, right? I try to show people what they can do as much as possible, you know. And everybody wants to be more confident, you know, and so I'll explain how fear works, you know, and how the fear of rejection is so overpowering, why it's so overpowering. First, you got to recognize that it is not a character flaw when your knees start shaking, you know, and it took me 20 years to fully accept the fact that it's okay to be terrified.
What do
Yeah.
you do in the moment in a courtroom when you're the guy, you're Rex Parris, you're there to attempt to get justice for your client or your clients? What do you do when your knees are shaking and you feel that?
I lower my heart rate. It's so elementary to me now. Let's talk about what fear is. Fear is something that's of something that'll happen in the future. It's not happening now. I'm still breathing. You know, I don't have any holes in my torso. You know, it's something that will happen in the future. So the first thing you do is you bring yourself to the present. How do you do that? Well, what do I see? Well, see a white coffee cup. It's actually, you know, library color. It's empty. I can't see to the bottom. My assumption is it's empty. There's some marks of the coffee drip marks on the side of it. It's as granular as I can make it because it shuts out anything that's happening in the future. I'm in the present. You know, what am I feeling? Well, you know, the right side of my butt has more pressure on it than the left side. It's probably because my legs are crossed, and I can feel the pressure on my left leg from the right leg. You know, what do I physically feel? As granular as I can get it. And then it's what do I feel emotionally? Well, like right now, I'm always a little anxious, a little nervous that I'm sounding like a nut job, because I know to most people this is not something they're used to hearing.
I'm going to help people get in touch with why what you're saying to an outsider may seem so unusual, but it's been, I don't know if you've thought about this, but this whole thing that you're describing right now has been sort of played out, they always say that, what is it, that popular culture, art imitates life, right?
Mhm.
You ever seen the movie The Legend of Bagger Vance?
No.
Watch
Oh, I
that.
did too. I did too. He was that was a golfing thing, right?
He's a caddy,
Right, right.
and he's a caddy, and he's helping Matt Damon, who's playing the hero of the South against Bobby Jones, and
Uh-huh.
I forget who the other golfer was, but they're playing this this match, and Matt Damon was supposed to be this this great golfer back in the day, but he had all this baggage from what he was supposed to be and who he was and what he was supposed to be and what he wasn't and what he did and didn't do. And Bagger Vance helps him get to what he calls the field, which is, and the crowds disappear and the whole sort of shortens up, and he's no longer talking about, there's no noise, he's just in the moment. He says, you got to stop living in the past and be here. He hits the ball in the woods, and he goes, you can pick the ball up if you want. And that's one way to do it, but the other is, you need to, that who you were back then, you're never going to be that person again. All you have is who you are now. It was great because it was, as you're talking to me, and I hope that people who are listening to this, I'm thinking of that movie. It wasn't described this way because they wanted it to sort of, wasn't described in a scientific way. But it was really getting this guy who had this baggage of the war and who he was supposed to be and who he wasn't anymore, to shed all of that and be in the exact moment, feel the blades of grass, feel the leaves, feel the wind, and clear his mind. It's called see the field. It's fascinating that you are describing that. And so you can't be describing unless whoever made that blockbuster movie and those actors who all played in it, and it gets replayed, unless they're nut jobs, you're not a nut job, because what you're describing is the very same thing.
Understand what I'm saying here. I don't think I'm a nut job. And I've taught this enough that I know that, few people in the room are going to be thinking I am. But if that's the feeling I'm having at the moment, I identify it. And it's never really left me, like I hear all this stuff about who I'm supposed to be, that, I'm still the busboy, and who I am. I'm still the kid who couldn't walk through the cafeteria. There's still that part of me. And so I've learned to just not listen to it. Let me finish it and then let's go back to that, because I think that's an important thing I learned along the way. But once I've got really into the present, then you breathe, but you have to breathe in a very specific way. It's, you breathe in at a count of 4, you release at a count of 4, you, wait a minute, yeah, where am I? Yeah, breathe in, hold it for a count of 4, release for a count of 4, hold again for a count of 4. It's the 4 box. And that was developed by the Navy SEALs, because the Navy SEALs, it's impossible to shoot, Osama bin Laden after you just crashed the helicopter, unless you can bring that heart rate down. They're very cognizant of their heart rate, because you can't be afraid with a slow heart rate. The physicality, there's a circularity to it.
I think biathletes do that too, right? They are cross-country skiing, and they have to get to a spot, and they got to hit a certain number of shots, and they need to immediately
get that heart rate down. That's why cross-country skiing and shooting is so hard, by the way.
Yes, both are hard. Both are hard, independent of the other.
And so you do the 4 box breathing, and then as you feel that fear subside and the heart rate subside, I'm back. That's what when I do my presentation, I play a thing with James Brown doing "I'm back," with a dance to it. But I really do visualize I'm back. It's very important that my mood be very positive and appropriate. And I'll talk about that in a little bit.
What's what would you say is your proudest moment in the courtroom? I don't mean your case. What was the proudest moment you had in the courtroom?
When I watched my son do an opening, that was truly, truly compelling. You know?
Tell me about that.
Well, it was actually the mini opening, you know, but the case was over when he sat down. And I forget the words he used, but he was there. He got it. He was in the zone. He was totally connected with it. You know, it was when one time Jason Fowler, he's one of our partners. I watched him the first time I saw him do a cross-examination. I was going to fire him. Yeah, it can sometimes be an asshole, and and he froze, you know, and it was intolerable to me at the moment. And then my wife reminded me I was being an asshole. Everything was fine. You know? But I watched him take down this life care planner. It was the most remarkable thing I'd ever seen. And it was far better than I could have done. And it was, but the pride of knowing that I had a significant part in creating that ability, you know, it was truly remarkable. And I've had a lot of those moments watching associates and the kids and a lot of those moments. And those are the moments that count. What I do in the courtroom, it doesn't have nearly the significance. You know, just being in LA Superior Court, there's this really long hall. They have these long hallways, you know, poorly designed buildings, but you know, they're old. And just watching my sons walk down that hall, you know, it makes life meaningful to me.
Amazing. You must be so proud.
Yeah.
He teaches with you, right?
Kale teaches with me. And Alex, who used to be my son-in-law, he teaches with me. You know?
Amazing.
Yeah.
So have you had any, because I think one of the things that people are always curious about, do you use notes when you're questioning a witness?
No, I don't. I use mind maps. I can show you one if you want.
Yeah, I would love to see that.
It'll take me a moment. So let's keep talking as I look.
Yeah, so we'll come back to that because I do want to, what do you think is the most, important part of a trial? You've got we got voir dire, obviously, opening, direct, cross-exam, closing, and everybody has an opinion about what they think is the most important. And despite the title of this podcast, I'm interested in the whole package. So,
well, the most important part is the verdict.
Well, I appreciate that, but what's the most important part? Okay, you got me there. But what's the most important phase of the actual stuff you're doing?
Well, I think it has to be voir dire if you have voir dire. Some jurisdictions don't. Let's see, I'm going to move this over to you.
Rex, how do you get jurors to? So many people these days have heard about tort reform and are afraid someone's getting a free ride or is getting, or looking for the easy way out or and that's what the defendants are, right? That's what they're sort of hanging their hat on, that these people are.
They still think that's effective. Huh?
No, I don't. I'm asking you whether or not I'm asking you, in your opinion, maybe your view is that things have changed so much that it's no longer an issue. But I'm curious of your view about that.
Well, I think it's an issue to some people, obviously. But what I've seen in myself too many times when I try to deal with those issues like that what I'm really trying to do is change their mind about it, right?
Yes.
Rather than just trying to figure out who's the best juror to sit here.
Okay.
The last case I did pre-COVID, it was kind of fun actually, because it was against Tesla, and
It was against Tesla.
Tesla, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Taking out a giant there.
It was a workplace injury, you know. How Tesla does business model is they subcontract. All the workers are from another company, and you know, there's advantages to that. But one of the disadvantages is you can pierce workers' comp, you know, and that's what we were able to do. But you know, the judge was very clear with us about we better not violate his motions in limine. But his orders were a little less than clear. You know, like one of the orders was we weren't allowed to use the what's David Ball's thing, the reptile theory.
Okay.
Right? Well, I said, Judge, I never read that book. I understand I'm quoted, but I never read it. He was unamused. Wasn't allowed to use the reptile theory. Okay.
Even though you hadn't read it and you were just doing your own thing.
Don't say reptile. Okay. What? I don't know. Anyway, so Cale does that mini opening, and his biggest sin was it was too compelling, which I would have preferred he not have done, by the way, because what I'm looking for is jurors to get rid of. You know, instead we showed them which jurors to get rid of.
Yeah, I get it. So basically,
but anyway,
there's a mini opening before voir dire, and then it teed up, it highlighted the jurors that were with you, right? Right.
But the judge was offended about some. I didn't quite follow it. The other side didn't object. The next morning, we get a call, be in court at 8 o'clock. Cale had already left to go to this wedding. You know, I was going to pick the jury. And when I get there, this judge is just livid, you know, about it. And I think what he was really livid about is the case was already over. You know, it was that good.
Wow, fantastic.
And, but you know, at one point, you know, I stood up and I said, because he was saying it was done deliberately, and I said, Judge, this is my son you're talking about, and I know who he is, and he absolutely did not deliberately do anything. And for you to put that on the record is a violation of the judicial canons. You know, he is also an officer of the court, but more importantly, I would not do it to your child. You know, I'm expecting to go to jail any second now, but it was.
He was calm as you are right now?
No.
In saying that to him?
A little more animated.
Interesting.
I mean,
I had a prosecutor in case you
I really thought he was making a mistake. I didn't think it was malicious, but I didn't think he was fully cognizant of the impact of it. You know, trials today aren't what they used to be. Now they live forever. You know, used to be what happened in that courtroom really didn't matter. The only people who knew about it were the participants, and if there was a court reporter, how it read, you know. But now with the internet, that's different. But anyway, so he pulled back, but he said, you had better not violate one motion in limine during voir dire, and you can have 30 minutes. So now I'm really on my best behavior.
Was 30 minutes enough for you?
Well, this is what happened was the next thing I know, I'm in it an hour. A juror said, Your Honor, I got a parking meter problem. The judge goes, okay, let's take a break, and Mr. So-and-so can fix his parking lot. I mean, just put money in the parking meter. And when we get back, Mr. Parris will finish his voir dire. You know, I'm already an hour into it because I was so I never left the rules. And the only thing I talked about were the damages, because it was an admitted liability case, essentially. And I had, I have all the damages that they're going to be asked to consider on a board, or as I'm asking, voir dire the jury. And I didn't ever veer from that. It was, I want to talk to you about humiliation, and then just have a conversation with them. It was the best voir dire I'd ever done. The comments I got from other lawyers that had come to watch, I hadn't intended to do that voir dire, but because of the confines were so. When what it really is an ability to have a conversation with somebody. It's an ability to listen to them, If I'm talking more than 40 seconds, this is true in life, I'm talking too much, a good conversation is 40 seconds. They will reveal themselves with that framework. You just have to listen and delve a little deeper, and you have to have some basic skills on how to get people to talk. Want to see
Rex,
one?
I've heard so many lawyers try to teach other lawyers, and they encourage them to just be yourself.
You will never hear me say be yourself.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Well, that's really a big thing with the Spence method, but it's one I disagree with, because that assumes there's this homunculus up inside our skull that is directing everything. Got a little man doing, telling.
Right, like a guy like at the airport, like directing the plane like this.
Right.
Yeah.
No, we don't have that. We live in columns. It's the context of what we're doing at the moment. Right now I'm doing interview Rex. This is what you see when Rex does an interview. It's not what you see when I'm sitting in the kitchen table with my wife. That doesn't mean that this is any less real in me than when I'm with her. It's a different context, is all. What to me being real and genuine and sincere is expressing what you're feeling at the moment. Who I'm trying to be genuine. I'm trying to be accurate. I'm trying not to put on a front, and that's an effort. It takes cognitive resources to do. But that's what it means, and it mostly means being aware of how I'm feeling.
So you're going to send me an example of a mind map.
Oh yeah, you're going to love it. All right, so the case against the trial lawyers college, Jerry Spence versus them, and then versus him. I had to go through all the minutes. I have to know what the minutes have to say, right? And so here, the January 21st 2015 meeting, right?
Yes.
Those are the key points for that meeting. So if I'm and they're going to depose me in a month, and I'm taking this with me, the mind maps with me, then I'll have the minutes there. I'm not going to answer a question about what happened in 2014.
And I just pointed to the thing that you brought out here, right? This is what you're talking about here. Like these are
right. So
this is how you identified these.
These are like essentially notes, but what they really are is just keywords about what happened on that day in that meeting that I think are important. And so when you ask me something, I'll be able to find it, much easier to find it on something like this. It also, by the time I get this done before the deposition, I'll have pictures in there, a lot of pictures, because your brain works with visuals, not words. And the whole idea is to remember what you're doing here. Like I'll do this with a witness. I'll have all the points I want from the witness. And if I'm going to cross-examine them with a deposition, I'll have page and line up there also. And then that gives me the freedom. I don't care where he takes me. I'll go with him because I know I can come back. I can see it all very quickly, especially if there's pictures of it. And Brian Panish, incredible lawyer, remarkable. He couldn't get over this, because it's so much more efficient and so much more the way we think. It gives me the flexibility. If I have it all out linearly on on an outline form, I'm stuck to it. I had a California Voter Rights Act action against Santa Monica, and it was Gibson Dunn, one of America's largest law firms, senior partners, people who argue in front of the Supreme Court, but they all did it the same way. They took the depots, they deconstructed them, it's all linear. And as soon as I started dancing and the judge sustained something, they were lost. It took them about probably 3 to 4 minutes to get back on track. That doesn't happen to us, I don't know what, it's all in front of me. I know how to go there. But you got to read the book on, how to map.
So this is, well, I mean, I certainly wouldn't, I'm going to give a little bit of a caution to people at home, like, don't try this at home unless you know what you're doing, right? But the way you have this laid out, I mean, it's so incredibly more, obviously, even all of this means something to you, but it's so much different than just having like a note. People flip their notes. F. Lee Bailey was like, he hated seeing lawyers stand there and look at their notes because you just lost contact with the witness.
Yeah, what I do is I go up to every witness with one of these, and sometimes, if I brought in the case really late, one of my associates or my sons will prepare the mind map, and I can just do it off the mind map. I don't recommend that, but that has happened. And also by the time you've mind mapped it out, rarely do I look at them. I mean, sometimes I have to, but rarely. And it's kind of fun in the courtroom, like in that particular case. I go, oh, so one thing happened in that case. I show up in the morning. I don't know that I'm on, because I wasn't supposed to be on. The witness wasn't supposed to be there that day, and the defense attorneys, I think they were messing with me actually. Snuck them in. Well, we sent you an email last night. Well, last night I was sleeping. And so they were just so thrilled with themselves. They were going to get away with this, because we had a rule. You had to tell us by 5 o'clock today. So I sit down and I grab a notebook and, I start the mind map, of what I'm going to ask this witness, right? It took me all of about 10 minutes, tops, maybe 5, I said, okay, this is what I'm going to cross-examine them on. You want to read it?
Amazing. So someone
they do, but they say no,
If I wanted to learn how to begin to understand how to mind map, to improve my, lawyering, or if someone wanted to do that who's listening, where should they start? What are some good resources?
Go on to Amazon, pull one of Buzan's books on mind mapping. They're short.
Buzan. Yeah. Buzon or
Buzan, I think.
Okay.
The idea is, our brain is just a jumble of stuff that you reconfigure every time you pull back a memory. And the idea is, don't try to do it in a linear fashion. That is not how we're designed. We're much more designed like this. And but it gives me the ability to focus on that witness, because I'm really not thinking about what my next question is. I don't need to. When I do the voir dire, I'm really not thinking about my next question. I'm listening. I'm looking for a key word that I can, further expand. But if I had linear notes, I couldn't do that. It's too hard. Everything, when I'm in trial, the office, the team that goes in with me, a primary consideration is how to lower my cognitive load. Because there's a book out there called Scarcity that talks about our bandwidth. And this is the example I use just to piss people off, and I like to get a reaction. Did you know that poor people are dumber than you and me? And, you're as uncomfortable as you are right now. But it's true. And the reason I know that is because in the research, if you restore people or bring people up to a middle class income, their IQ goes up 10 to 15 points. So it's the reversal. You're okay with me now. I'm really not a pig. But that is true research. And it's because when my mother was raising the four of us, every day she had to worry about, did she pay the water bill or did she get Rex's gym clothes so he didn't have to run laps? If he pays the water bill, are they going to shut off the electricity? The enormity of the pressures, middle class people that commute, right? They got to get back by a certain time to pick the kids up from daycare. There's these cognitive load. Just the act of driving. Do you know how many decisions you make every minute? It's hundreds. Raking, doing all this. Those are all things that are taking cognitive energy. By the time you get to the courtroom, I've already beat you because I don't drive. Somebody else does. I don't decide what to have for breakfast. Somebody else does. The night before, I lay my clothes out so I don't have to make a decision in the morning. We preserve that bandwidth with all that we are. There's always a team with me, and one of the people on that team, they know to go get me coffee with before the break comes, so I don't even have to ask for it. Not because I'm so cool or because I'm so arrogant, or it's because we are all striving for one thing, and that's the verdict. And the more cognitive load that I'm relieved of, a nap during the day is we really work at being able to do that. We're rarely successful because of the way the courthouse is, how far it is from us. Sleeping is critically important to us, and we have all kinds of different techniques to be able to get to sleep during a trial. It's really an unfair contest because of those little techniques, but you see how granular it becomes.
I do.
And what we eat, is extremely important during a trial. We don't eat carbs, it's protein at lunch, anything that's going to make me tired, that can't be on the menu. Lawyers love to fight with each other during the case. They just love to mess with each other. We've learned not to do that, because if I make him angry, he's going to be more hypervigilant. He's going to be better, not less, not worse. I used to think it was the other way around. But at the same time, it does take cognitive load. One of the other lawyers will step between him and me, and I'll walk away. We choreograph everything down to that. Don't waste your cognitive energy. You're going to need it, because when you're talking to that juror, you have to be totally focused on that juror, and you have to have the energy to do that.
Brilliant. I know you say it, and I say brilliant, and I think you're going to say, but it's elemental, and it is, but I don't think a lot of people.
It's not elementary. It's elemental.
I said elemental, not
Right.
not elementary. It's elemental.
Right.
So when I say brilliant, I know you're thinking, but it's elemental. But we don't ever think about it on that granular level, as you put it.
When you as the mayor of the city, what I've learned is I don't want to hear what a great leader I am. The moment they start telling me that crap, they want me to slow down. You know, they're trying to satisfy my ego so I won't have another idea tomorrow morning. No, they're not thinking that.
I understand. I get it.
I don't want to have people blowing smoke up my ass because it makes me less. It doesn't make me more, you know? And I'm totally comfortable with the idea that you're smarter than I am. You know, I had brain surgery in law school where they didn't actually remove it, it atrophied, but there's a piece of my brain missing. You know, I used to be really smart, but you know, I don't need to hear how smart I am. What I probably do more than most other people is I work harder, meaning I study in the morning. My wife, you know, I'm always pissed off because the associates aren't reading enough books, you know. And she goes, Rex, they got a job. You know, she has lifted all of the management of the office up from me, and now her and other people do it. I don't even know which bank I go to. You know, I don't the decisions most people have to make, we don't allow me to make, you know, because my only role is to get better at persuading people. You know?
I get it. It's fantastic. Rex, what lies ahead for you and your firm? So let me ask, I know you're going to be doing something with at the Thunderhead Ranch, the Spence method at Thunderhead Ranch this summer, right?
I'm really looking forward to that.
And then you also
I've taught there for 25 years now. But now it'll be this program is going to be so much better, you know, because what'll always happen is you have people that actually produce things that make things happen, that, you know, go to courtroom, go into trial, having an impact on the world. You know, I think that, you know, the size of our verdicts is a poor way to measure, but it's about the only way to measure, you know, the quality of the lawyer. But it is a very poor way to measure. But you will always then have people that act like they are that person, but are afraid to be that person, or won't do the work to be that person. And that's what happened with the Trial Lawyers College. You know, we looked up one day, and the people who were actually trying cases no longer came and taught. You know, it had been infiltrated by the posers in many respects. And the people that are doing that don't know that. I mean, because they never grew comfortable with discussing that fear. I'm still terrified to go into court. I go anyway, you know. And it's had an incredible effect on the firm. You know, the other day, one of the attorneys settled a case for $23 million. It was a $100,000 insurance policy, and they paid him $23 million. And we were all pissed off, you know, because he settled the case.
Amazing.
You know, and we just had you know, that was about 6 months ago. And yesterday at lunch, we were talking about it, is, you know, it's because we measure by the year. You know, we measure the income of all the attorneys by the year, and he didn't want to have a bad year. You know, and so he had a great year. But we knew that the potential of that case could have been significantly higher. Now other firms hear that and think I'm nuts, you know, because, you know, they gave you $23 million on 100 policy. I mean, you should be celebrating. And there is value to that way of looking at it. But, you know, it's different with us.
So after the Spence method at Thunderhead Ranch,
yeah,
you've got Trial Lawyers University in Las Vegas. I'm sure you've got some other stuff you're doing in between there.
You know, it's gotten to the point now that I learned 48 hours before. But, you know, I've got this catalog of PowerPoint and keynote slides. You know, we've probably got 1,000 of them. You know, I can put them together pretty quickly. And the goal is to deal with whatever the new stuff I'm learning. Like right now, I'm really working on simplification of what that really means. What does it mean to simplify? Now, the concept goes back to Feynman. He's one of the world's greatest scientists. Was the one who said, "Yeah, but be able to explain it to a 10-year-old, and wherever that 10-year-old doesn't understand, go back and do it again till they do, right?" And that's for science. Are we doing? And I've always kind of known that. I think Jerry taught us that at the ranch. I would always do the openings with the kids. When they were 8, 9, and 10.
See if they got it.
Yeah.
So because you have so much to offer, Rex, if people who are listening to the podcast wanted to find out more about you, your son, your firm, where would they go? Where would they look?
We give everything we have. We don't have any secrets, and that was hours of debate for us to make that decision. My wife used to say, "Quit teaching this stuff. You're teaching your competitors. Quit teaching this stuff." And so I asked Paul Rivera about it, 15, 20 years ago. And because he teaches it all the time. And he said, "Rex, I've taught thousands of lawyers." And one of the things he taught about was neuro-linguistic programming. He says, "You're the only one that went and got certified."
Get it.
And so if there's a concern like that out there, it doesn't matter anyway.
Oh no, I just want people to be able to, if they wanted to find you, your website, is there
I lost my train of thought, sorry. It's Rex, RREX at Parris, PARRIS.com. If you want, send me an email, tell me what you want to know, or you want a reading list, or stuff like that. I'll be happy to do it.
And how about your law firm, if they wanted to reach out to your law firm or learn more about your law firm?
It's Parris.com.
Parris.com?
Yeah, PARRIS, but Parris.com.
Okay.
And you didn't ask me about my most interesting thing, the thing that I'm really dedicated to.
Okay. What are you really dedicated to? What's your most interesting thing?
A couple of years ago, my wife and I gave the startup funding for a biotech company out of USC. And I think we have the answer to autoimmune diseases.
Wow.
As hard as it's the most exciting stuff going on in medicine now. And I'm the president of Carthronics, CARTHRONIX. If anybody has osteoarthritis, we will be in human trials within 6 months. And it at least in dogs, it no longer exists. We know that for a fact, that we can stop osteoarthritis in large animals. The science is robust. And I guess one of the reasons I'm bringing that out is the great thing about being a lawyer, it requires you to become knowledgeable about whatever your client is doing. And that gives you a wealth of options and such a broad base of knowledge. Because people will ask, what is a mayor and a lawyer doing as president of a biotech? Had I not been the lawyer, couldn't have happened.
Unbelievable.
And I think I'm a pretty effective mayor for that same reason. We were the first net zero city in the world. We're now next week signing a deal with Japan. We will be the first hydrogen powered city in the country. Naomi will be the first one in Japan. I think they're already there.
You're making a difference.
Yeah, and you can do that because of all the stuff you learn as being a lawyer. And if you don't limit yourself, I rarely say no to something. Now they have people saying no for me, but like I love to teach. I love to, life. I tell my kids that, if they wake up one morning and I didn't, I had the best life. You know?
Unbelievable. It's incredible. I tell you, um, I really am, I didn't know what to expect from this conversation today. And because you and I had never met. And, I don't want to say that I'm impressed, but I'm going to share something with you that is two things that you said that are really hit home for me. And they really are unrelated to your accomplishments in the courtroom and the things that you've done. One is the clear pride that is evident in your description of watching your son not just do something well, but just even begin to do it, which was your description of walking down the hallway in the courthouse and saying, "That's my boy." Because I know what that's like. That's incredible. And I felt that as a father, I could feel the pride. And the second was when you just shared with me the story about you saying that you don't worry about me if I don't wake up because I had a wonderful life. That resonated with me in a way that you couldn't have possibly known, but I hope you'll let me share it with you. My grandmother, a blessed memory, she was my grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and she had everything in Vienna, Austria, everything. And then of course the Nazis came, and her father, my great grandfather, after whom I'm named, was able to get her to the United States, and she went from everything to nothing. And she ended up marrying my grandfather. They were married for, I think, 79 years or something like that. And I remember sleeping on a really awful pull-out bed in their, in a condo they rented in Florida for a couple of weeks. And I had one of those pull-out beds, that has like the really thin mattress and the metal bar in the middle. So it's just, just right against my back. I mean, I just couldn't find a way to get comfortable, but I didn't dare not stay there because it was so important for them that I was there.
Right.
After everything they went through, my grandmother turned to my grandfather one night. I could hear them in the bedroom, just, down the, it was a small little condo apartment. And I could hear her say, "Norbert, we've lived a wonderful life." After everything she had been through, she still felt that her life was wonderful because she was with her family. So as you described what your morning would be like, or what the night before would be like if you didn't wake up in the morning, that really resonated with me. And and I did not know that we would get there, or that we even would have, that there would be that you would share that and that it would impact me in that way, but it has, and I appreciate it. So
thank you for sharing that with us,
Rex. I can't tell you how pleased I am that two of my colleagues, and Norm Pattis and Dan Ambrose, both encouraged me to reach out to you and to have this conversation.
Have you had Norm on?
What's that?
Have you had Norm on?
I had Norm on. Yes.
Norm is I think one of
awesome
the
too.
people I've ever met.
Great. He was awesome.
We had him out at the house for about 5 days a month ago, and it was glorious.
He's awesome, and he immediately after we finished the interview, he's like, "You need to, to speak with Rex." And so I was like, "Absolutely." And then of course, Dan with, he wanted me to speak to you as well. And I can just say, I'm so glad that both of them encouraged me to do that. And that you're so gracious with your time. I've taken up so much of it this morning. So,
Norm is responsible for wonderful things in my life, because 20 years ago, I'm on the phone with him and I'm saying, I'd really like to be able to teach. Right? I hadn't taught anywhere yet, teach lawyers, right? And he goes, "Well, what have you done that's worth teaching?" I mean, talk about brutal honesty.
It's great.
But it made me confront that. And that was one of those things that was pivotal in making me confront my terror of that courtroom and doing it anyway.
No, I can't thank you enough for taking part, Rex. You're everything that you're cracked up to be. So the old Ernie Harwell, who was the Detroit Tigers broadcaster for years before he passed, used to always say about a player, he would say, he is as advertised. And so I can say that about you sincerely. You are as advertised. So Rex, thank you for appearing on Killer Cross-Examination. It was really an honor, and I mean that, an honor.
Anytime. I enjoyed the morning. Thank you.